Donald Trump isn't just getting beat by Hillary Clinton amongst voters under 30, the youth voters. That would imply that he's coming in second, which is not the case. Take a look at this poll. We got a chart for you. The results are exciting. He's coming in fourth among voters under 30.
Wow.
Getting crushed by Gary Johnson, almost getting doubled by Jill Stein, not to mention how Hillary Clinton is totally trouncing him. Gary Johnson and Jill Stein are almost actually matching Hillary Clinton combined. You basically see a lot of the young Democrats probably going to Jill Stein, many of the young conservatives going to Gary Johnson, and undecided voters splitting amongst those.
Yeah, you know, let me jump in if I can just for one quick sec, because it's a McClatchy Marist poll, and it's a reputable polling organization. It does, as the poll in general out this week is a bit of an outlier. It's the one that had Hillary Clinton. I don't think it's Clinton. I think
15.
It's just Clinton. Hillary Clinton ahead by 15. So you could dismiss that a little bit, as you always dismiss the farthest poll in either direction when there are this many polls. But you can't dismiss those numbers. I mean, all Trump could say is maybe I'm not at 9, maybe I'm at 14 in reality, but you're in fourth. There's no way around that.
And in that particular group, it's not a huge sample size, but this isn't so far off from some other polls, the results under 30. In some of those, he's doing better, but he's still almost always getting beat by Johnson. Some of these polls actually don't include Jill Stein, but she almost certainly has disproportionate a percentage of her support coming from youth voters. We have some other numbers from it as well that maybe are even more important than whether he's losing to those two other candidates. Trump's favorable ratings among voters under 30 in the McClatchy poll is just 13%, with 82% unfavorable. This is not like undecideds. This is no, we don't want him. He does worse with them than he does among Latinos, who he has targeted since day one in his campaign, and nearly as poorly as he does amongst self-described liberals.
Who are the 10% of liberals who have a favorable impression?
This is people who say, are you a liberal? They say yes. That's the extent of that. Yeah.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, so first of all, the difference between the liberals and the young is nearly indistinguishable anyway. Recent polling among millennials shows that they are super progressive. So there's not much of a difference between saying someone is a millennial and saying that they're progressive. There's a tiny fraction of libertarians, almost no Republican supporters, and you could see it in Trump's polling. Other Republicans don't do that much better than Trump anyway. But I know what Trump's answer is going to be. If you could put up the first graph again, he's going to say, okay, now it's a McClatchy Marist poll, but if you notice on the right-hand side, it says the fix. Hence, it's rigged.
The fix is in.
Anything that shows me losing is rigged. It says right there, the fix.
Blacklisted. The Washington is blacklisted.
Well, we're gonna cover all the rigging stuff just a little bit later on. I do want to say, so we acknowledged a couple minutes ago that the poll with the 15%. This is the same poll where Hillary Clinton's up by 15. We can critique that. And I acknowledge that the sample size for voters under 30 is a little bit low. So look, part of being a critical thinker and caring about the evidence is going into the polls and seeing what its weaknesses might be. That's one thing. There's this huge controversy that's developed over the past week for this CNN poll that in the crosstabs listed no people between 18 and 34. To take that and then say, I'm not trusting any polls from here on out. Polling as a concept doesn't work. That's not critical thinking. It is almost certainly a data reporting error, or the fact that in the crosstabs they might not list the group because it was too small, but that doesn't mean they weren't included in the group. And furthermore, a lot of people aren't necessarily explicitly saying this, but they seem to think that that's an indication that the poll is being manipulated by the Hillary Clinton campaign. Hillary Clinton, when it's her or Trump, she crushes Trump. There's no advantage for Hillary Clinton to leaving out a group that she does the best against him in.
And
so critical thinking is important. Exactly. Critical thinking is important, but don't turn off an entire area of election studies because one poll had one crosstab that looked suspect. Polling is still a thing.
Boy, that was right out of somebody getting his PhD in political psychology.
Right. Only way that would have been better is if he had finished
it. Right.
I was wondering if that was going to...
Okay. Yeah. So now...
Crosstab, though. He went to that class.
Yeah. Crossstabbing 101. So now to the John's point about the other polls, Fox News and Pew basically have Trump and Gary Johnson tied in this same demographic. So it's not just McClatchy's polling. It's shown across the board here. And it's not surprising because as the young are not very Republican to begin with, to say the least, let alone Donald Trump, who is uber right-wing on some of these issues that the young are more socially liberal in. So when he goes against Muslims, Mexicans, races, ethnicities, etc., that turns off the young more than almost any other category. So that's why some of the young are libertarians. So they're like, okay, you do whatever you want with your lifestyle, and we don't discriminate. We just happen to disagree on economics, etc. So now, I actually think the other interesting thing that comes out of this is Gary Johnson is super for real. I started saying this on the show this week. I think there's some chance that Republican donors start shifting in a big way to Gary Johnson. And Trump's drop in the polling this week has been so precipitous, so quick, so thorough, that we might have a completely different dynamic on our hands really soon. I've been saying for a long time, third and fourth party candidates might be relevant in this election. I was saying it in the beginning of the primaries, let alone after the primaries. But it's happening. It's happening right now.
But typically their numbers, and this is not a typical election, I'll grant you that, their numbers, third-party candidates and fourth-party, thank you for saying that, because when they're four, which one's the third, their numbers kind of wane as it gets closer to Election Day. Do you think that dynamic is going to change this
Definitely
year?
changed. Okay, so every article mentions that.
I mean, it hasn't changed yet. I'm saying that
it's going to change in this election.
That's what I mean.
Okay, so it's very fair to mention that, because that is what has happened most of the time in the past. So if you're a reporter and you cover this for a living, you say, hey, but remember, keep in mind that it often wanes in a normal election. But this is not a normal election cycle. Maybe I wasn't in the minutiae enough of the other election cycles where the third-party candidates were relevant enough, the Ross Perot's, et cetera.
There's also only ever really been one who's been viable, or not. None. There have been none that have been viable. There have been one that have been
Got very close.
pulled the attention
in
more
the last
attention.
90 years. Yes.
Yeah.
But when
Obviously
you say
prior
it's
to
going to
that.
have an impact, what's the word you used? For a third-party candidate, we're going to make a difference. They're going to. I mean, it depends on what. I mean, the third-party candidate made a huge difference in 2000. They had a gargantuan, historic, societal, world-changing impact.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean that.
Yeah.
So that's already obvious. So even if they just get 2% in a swing state, that might make all the difference. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying I think Gary Johnson starts to beat Donald Trump in overall numbers in some states.
Well, you remember at the DNC, I wanted to put that at the RNC. I wanted to put that bet down. We talked about it on the air. I mean, you talked to a million
That
conversations.
he beats him in a state?
No, that I was like, what odds could I get right now to put $100 on Gary Johnson defeating Donald Trump?
So coming in second.
Coming in
Yes,
second
yes.
in the election.
Wow.
And
I'm
is that
telling you right now,
I
that
don't
is
know.
super
It's a fun
real
bet.
right now.
It's a fun
right
bet.
now,
I
it's
could
possible.
hear a couple states, Utah maybe or something like that. Overall, that's not impossible.
it
that's
would-
hard
it
to
would
imagine.
require a falling off a cliff that he hasn't quite fallen off
And
yet.
an
But I mean, but he's-
infusion of $100+ million from wealthy donors. I would
unless he
imagine.
totally quits, in which, I mean, essentially
Yeah.
quits, whether it's de facto or de jure, but he's just stops running. He doesn't care. He says crazy things, and there's talk.
It'd be hard to tell if he made that transition.
It's true. Well, if he just stopped, like he just didn't. He went about running his business. He took a 3-week vacation.
Yeah.
That might only help him, actually.
It's true.
Numbers stabilize.
But there have been rumors, talk that either Jeb Bush or Mitt Romney might endorse him, and that would be that would make
Gary
him-
Johnson.
Gary Johnson.
Oh, Gary Johnson. Okay, that makes more sense.
That would make
Yeah.
a big difference. It would certainly create a
If he endorsed him Utah alone, that would make a
it would
gigantic
create
difference.
a
Well,
firestorm
Mitt would,
of press about it. I mean, it would just
Right.
give this incredible boost of media energy to the Johnson campaign, which might get him
Please, Jeb,
closer to that
just do it.
15% number that he needs.
The
Now,
other thing that
there's-
happens, though, John, sorry, is the more you know about these candidates, in other words, the more viable they become over the next couple of weeks, the more people start to learn about them, and the more liberals realize, whoa, wait a second, I'm not so comfortable with Gary Johnson. The more that some conservatives also look at it and say the same thing, too. So the more they're under the microscope, they don't have this sort of, oh, they're not Hillary Clinton, they're not Donald Trump. That's sort of
But
sexy.
as long as we have no data. So let me say that the flip side is the number of Republicans who I suspect, because I keep meeting Republicans who aren't hideous, right? So, and who just like, they never have drawn the distinction between when Bob Dole and Richard Lugar and Howard Baker ran the party to now, right? That things are very, very different. And so I imagine that there are plenty of Republicans who might look and think, who aren't filled with vile hatred, who might think, oh, That's all right. I like that guy. It's a limited government guy and leave people alone in their bedrooms. Okay, I don't need to know more than that.
So there's a great number of reasons why you guys are almost egging me on to call it right now, saying Gary Johnson is going to beat Donald Trump. So let me explain, though. I'm not quite there yet.
How does it jibe with the this week with George Stephanopoulos? Donald Trump's going to beat Hillary Clinton.
So then let me do both of those because that's a super fair question, obviously. So I said that just 5 days ago, right? So because after the DNC convention, which they did a stand-up job and they got a bump, and at that point on Sunday, we'd only had about one poll that showed their bump, not that many, at most 2 polls. So, but we knew that I knew they were going to get a bump out of it, and I thought Hillary Clinton's up by about 4 points or so at that point. Okay, so if Donald Trump had done what he did in the primaries and said, just attack his opponents mercilessly, Little Marco, Lion Ted, etc., and all he did was crooked Hillary, I'm not taking the money, she's taking the money. He presented a populist rage that in a populist time period where that could have worked. But but the other possibility was he's can't help himself and he's gonna keep talking about himself. Because as I said on this week, I said, if the election's about Hillary Clinton, she loses. If the election's about Donald Trump, he loses. But boy, has the last 5 days been nonstop. Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. Crazy stories about Donald Trump, one after another. And the other thing what we needed to know was, is Hillary Clinton going to play this kind of soft, or is she going to do what she go behind the scenes, plant stories in the media, and just take a blowtorch and a lead pipe to this guy? And this week has shown, blowtorch, lead pipe, he has no idea what's hitting him. He has no idea how to react. And he's like, okay, let's talk about Trump, and what an idiot he is. So all of a sudden, that 4 or 5 point bump is now 11 points in Pennsylvania, 15 points in New Hampshire, and it's already over in New Hampshire, 9 points in Michigan. This race is almost over in the span of a week. She obliterated him, and he has no frickin' idea. So we have our answer as to how Hillary Clinton's going to run the campaign, even though Trump doesn't know it yet. Right. Her campaign has done a masterful job of egging him on, planning stories, and not in a malicious way. Just like, hey, look into the H-1B visa of Melania Trump. It doesn't seem to make too much sense. I'm like, okay, all right, here we go. And all of a sudden, we're nearly deporting his wife. Okay, so obviously it has not gone in the direction that we're in a scenario where Trump wins, right? A populist candidate wins. So now heading in this direction. Now, really smart move to put William Weld as his VP for Gary Johnson. Then we see the Koch brothers, also within the span of about this 10 days or so, say, no, never Trump. We're not going to give money to Trump. And there they are sitting as libertarians with libertarian candidates polling. Another thing that happens is now in some demos, Gary Johnson is beating him. And then, by the way, the mainstream media, unfortunately, same thing. As I explained, a little bit understandable, but Stu Rothenberg of Washington Post saying, as long as the libertarians and the Greens seem irrelevant and outside the political mainstream to the average voter, they will not be in the electoral conversation. When are they going to learn their lesson? This is not a normal election. This is the same thing they said about Bernie Sanders, the same thing they said about Donald Trump. So, yes, the libertarians are real. They're going to become more real as this conversation goes. And we've got 100 days from the end of the convention to the election, which is actually longer than normal. Normally it's about 3 months. They had the conventions a little early. It is too long for Donald Trump. He could barely sprint, let alone a marathon. He's going to run out of gas. And if the Koch brothers tip the scales and guys like Bush and Romney jump in and start endorsing Gary Johnson, unlike any election we've ever seen.
And also, it provides, I mean, I don't think anything wrong with what Stu Rothenberg said, because just for the record, he said, as long as libertarians and Greens seem irrelevant, and your point is that his point would also be, if they don't seem irrelevant, well, then they're not irrelevant. Right, and that changes it. But the great thing about it, money from the Koch brothers to be taken seriously, I mean, they have so much money, it's hard to imagine a scenario where they're not taken seriously. But for the Koch brothers and for one of the Bushes, probably not either of the presidents, but for Jeb or Mitt Romney, to endorse Johnson is a way to keep their viability alive going forward. And that would be true for everybody else down the ticket. And like, I am abandoning Trump, but I am officially not conceding it to this person who we've told you for 24 years is the devil. So like keep up, like, and I think it enables them to, they'll end up with an outcome they anticipated anyway, which is a Hillary Clinton victory. and a way to take a stand against Trump and still stand for conservatism.